bonjour.
Well, so we'll get started again. We're going to talk about mobility. This is essential because transportation is about 30% of green gas effect emissions, and this is a very complex issue in terms of transition. Now, to talk about this particular topic, we have an economist who's working a lot on aviation as well, but she's thinking a lot about all these mutations, changes that are occurring on transport. Now, Estelle Malavolti, she's a researcher at the Toulouse School of Economics, and also Benoît Lanus, who's the chair of an association, Reignite the Star. So this association is independent politically. It is an association gathering together all the MEDEF for the big bosses, representatives, and also environmentalists. So they promote the creation of some Toulouse entity relative to all the traffic jams that we have in Toulouse that you may have encountered last night or this morning. So, Benoît Lanus, could you present this particular association and tell us what is the objective? Because Toulouse is known for investing a lot in the metro, public transportation, and so on and so forth. So what is missing, and why did you create this particular association? And you have the tram as well. So yes, well, there are plenty of things. But of course, this is the pink city, and we want the conurbation to be pink as well, because part of the inhabitants work. It's about 1.3 million inhabitants who do not have an imperative to the personal car. This is good for the suburban people, but also for the tourist people, because today public transportation and the bikes are not so easy to move from one place to another. If you need a car, you are going to use them, but you could also use some other means of transportation. So we have to think and see what's missing in the mobility system in order to enable more actors and more inhabitants and city dwellers and company people not to abandon the car, but also at least to be able to reduce, to be less dependent on the car. And in order to do that, we identified that there are between the metro, which is doing a very good job at the very city center, and also the green buses, what is missing is city trains that would provide an alternative to the car or contribute in order to have a mobility system in order to reduce the dependence of the car. And it's a problem because relative to all the city dwellers, relative to the companies, who do not have any alternatives, we are implementing an emission zone which is going to exclude, as of the 1st of April 2024, 40% of the cars which will be excluded from the greater part of Toulouse. And in front of that, or faced with that, we have some subsidies for changing cars. But not everybody is going to be able to do that. So what sort of solution do we propose? And we can see there's none. And we can understand that there's some sort of exasperation or anger on the part of many city dwellers and also companies. We were talking with the president of the big corporations in Toulouse, and if with Rallumont l'Étoile and with this particular associations, we bring together environmentalists, a number of communes, and also companies, big companies and small companies. And it's because we want to show that in order to enable to evolve, there are things that can be done, that can be improved, not so much by looking at the star, but at having economic reasoning, by doing better, more quickly, and by optimizing and leveraging. Well, that's exactly what we need to see. What about your activity? You are essentially working in the field of aviation, but the plane is the very important part of the topic. But what about the green gas effects? It's not so much relative to the small trips and that are a problem. Could you explain that to us? Well, yes, you're right. Well, aviation is stigmatized because it's big and it's quite visible. It's a very visible mode of transport. And the emissions and the green gas emissions corresponding to this, the concentration per passenger is very high, is very important, definitely. And this is why we are focusing a lot on aviation, but it may not be the about 30% of the green gas effects are due to that, emissions are due to that. But about the long-distance mobility, this is an issue. And relative to that, there are a number of trips. If you want to carry them out, you have to go through the plane. But then how can we organize this particular mobility through issues that are also part of the are pertinent relative to the urban mobility, and I think that the intermodality or interconnection of all the means of transport, access to information as well relative to the users. Do we know how to organize this particular collaboration between the various modes of transport in order to propose an offering? Coming back to what we were saying, relative to an integrated offering, which seems to be one of the avenues, very practical avenue and faster avenue that has to be highlighted. And I think that the long-distance mobility and the short mobility should be joined together through a number of problematics or issues. Yes, definitely, relative to connectivity. Well, there are two actors to change things, the politicians and the consumers. Now, consumers, it's not so easy for them because the newspaper La Dépêche du Midi has put in a platform about climate change, and they're very pessimistic because consumers don't want to change their habits. And, for example, we don't want to spend much time. Okay for the train, but there are so many delays and strikes. So it's a problem. So we are going only to authorize the cars for the rich. For those who can afford to have an electric car. In Lyon, we'll have to become like the Soviet Union because we are going to tax the SUV and the four-wheel drives. And so we're going to tax the big liners and the ocean liners and the planes. But then we should have a second train line. So there we can see that consumers are not so mature to change their habits. But maybe we should give them the incentive and the tools. This is what we are working with. So that you should have some apps in order to understand how we can navigate with the public transports, with the bikes in Toulouse. And you are saying that the politicians are more desirous to do heavy investments that can be seen, that are on the headline of the newspaper, rather than having a more performing or efficient network. Existing network. Well, there are two topics. There's the question of the expectations by the users, the way they want to evolve, and what we can do to optimize this. Now, it has to be simple, efficient, and easy to use. With our associations, we want to be pragmatic, ambitious. We want to be more ambitious in the long term and more pragmatic by doing a step-by-step approach. Now, so what we have done, we had a wish with among all the partners. There's the political side, but we want to have an agreement on the first phase for the regional transport in 2029, to have some trains every half an hour, so to have coordinated bus system in order to be efficient and friendly. And I'll tell you how we can do that a bit later. But then relative to the access, what people are expecting, we have conducted a study or a survey. There were about 10 comments on the website of the Dépêche. We had 5,000 respondents from various communes around Toulouse, and so we questioned them about how they would go to the city. Are they satisfied with the way they are traveling? And also, if we were to do this first phase of the train every half hour, would they change their habits? Now, among the respondents, half of them said that the car remains and the bikes they would still be using the bike and the train, but the others would like to walk. Some are satisfied, but the others are not so satisfied. Half and half. And so we found out that there were 7 families of trains available. I'd like to talk about the drivers and the bikers first. Now, the drivers and bikers are fairly satisfied in our sample, and to know whether our proposals could improve their life, they say yes, definitely, 32%. Now, that's 1/3. Now, if you look at the drivers and the bikers that are not satisfied with the way they move, 2/3, because they're not so happy, they say yes, definitely, that would improve by 70% or 67%. And if you look at the comments, you can see that most are complaining that the solutions that are proposed do not enable them to avoid the car, because you need 1 hour to take if you board a bus and there's no train after it's an hour, and so on and so forth. So we can see the acceptability is okay, but then they're open to that. But it shows as well that if we follow Lausanne, a professor who looked at the mobility in various Switzerland's cities, and it shows that when there is offering, the mobilities change and evolve. And the category, like the exclusive drivers, has almost totally disappeared. The car has not disappeared, but many people have decided to change their mode of transport, and according to what they want to do, they will decide to use the car or public transport or a bike or walking. But then the practices have been changing a lot over the last 30 years. And so we are quite convinced that there's not so many people in the trains, despite all the efforts that are made. And we are very lucky because we have an ocean-based region, but there's not so many. The offering is insufficient, and the economic reasoning that we rely on is that we should, if we want to have people, you should have trains so that people could board them. So, prior to giving you the floor, I'd like to recall that you may ask questions if you want to with the QR code, and these are welcome. Now, what about the politicians or the policies? What you were saying when we were preparing this, politicians want to make proposals that will be clearly identified. We will have a metro, an airport, and huge investments that will be quite attractive. But then, as it takes some time to perform all these investments and work, there's a shift with the needs of the populations. So you studied that as well? Yes, definitely. Well, in order to contribute as well to what Benoit has just been saying regarding the studies that were made, showing that there's a lot of things about the individual behavior. Why is it an important problem in order to be able to convince people? The consumers to use another mode of transport than the car? It's because you have to know that after following the INSEE survey in 2021, 40% are using the cars in order to go over less than 1 kilometer distance. It would take 10 minutes walking or 5 minutes by car, and if you drive, it depends on the congestion of the traffic or not, whether there's traffic on this particular journey or not. Now, it's this 42% figure shows that this is what we would like to change by adapting the offering, as Benoit was suggesting. And we can also do that at various levels, because we can think about the relationship to time that the consumers may have, and because the time value is important, particularly it has to be taken into account when making the political decision. In order to answer your question, so that's a very important thing that you just said, that maybe the relation to time may be changing. We'll be less mobile because we'll work 2 or 3 days at home, for example, with the remote working. But if we move less, we'll accept other modes of transport with a different time, which will be less stressing. I think this is very interesting, and you studied that. Yes, you have to rethink the time relationship, and this is possibly one of the avenues that has to be considered. And also this relation to time in the economic modeling, because I'm a researcher in economics, that the journey of transport is always considered as a cost. So we are always trying to reduce this cost, particularly in terms of the time spent in the transport. So I think this optimization and the reducing the time, the transport time, rather than looking at the quality of transport, that may be an evolution avenue relative to the offering that can propose relative to the habits the consumers have. If you look at mobility from a long-distance point of view, right? If you compare trains and planes, if you ask the passengers whether they can work in a train or in a plane, most surveys show that the useful time over a journey in train is more important than the one that is useful in a plane, because there's more noise and there's all in all, this is important. You have to take this into consideration in our models and in the offering that we are proposing to the individuals or consumers. So this value of time and this acceptability relative to the time spent in the transport is something that has to be taken into account. And now, prior to coming back to the political decisions, what about another question? We are trying to talk about making the common transport more accessible, more glamorous and more attractive. And there's one question: what do you think about having some quotas and progressive taxes on the tickets? And this is punishing the ugly guy here and representing 30% of the carbon emissions. So rather than questioning the personal behavior in this, well, I can understand this question, because if you look at a return ticket from Lisbon to New York, it's about 1 year heating in Europe in terms of energy spent. And so you can see that's 1 year of heating, carbon heating. So I can understand this. It's a very, very interesting. Well, not so many people are using this. More than 50% of the inhabitants in the so is not 50% of the persons that are using the plane. So there you have this unfair side of the plane. So these quotas or these progressive taxes, I can understand them. So we need these taxes, and we should have a more attractive policy as well.
So
this is where we should provide solutions. So explain how we can optimize transportation in the area of Toulouse with actually very few investments, but apps and bikes. And well, why do politicians do not respond? First, the question of, so I'm going to address this question through the prism of long-distance trips. It's been years now that we have been told that creating what we call the LGV from Paris is very important, and we're going to put billions into this major fast train line. But today, the first TGV from Paris leaves at 6:24. So how many local trains start early enough in order for people to take that first train to Paris? So if you take all the first TERs, that is the local trains, they come too late. And it's the same thing in the evening. The last train from Paris arrives at 9:30, but there are no local trains anymore. So this illustrates the fact that there is inconsistency, and it costs today. If you want to encourage people to take the TGV without even waiting for that we would need a system that would enable those people not to take their cars to get to the train, because so the relevance of the train lines is that local trains would feed into the long distance trains. And and here we have an absurdity of the system that is shown. So in peak hours, roughly, on the 6 branches of the railway network star, we have about a half-hour delay or waiting time. Sometimes it's toward Toulouse or in the evening from Toulouse. You have trains and train lines that are underused because they're used 3 hours per day. They can cost about 7 million euros on purchase, and they're used so underutilized. So what we are saying is that if we could already start looking at what is needed in order for these lines to operate more so that we have a train every half hour. So the model does exist everywhere. So it's railways is an industry with very, very expensive fixed costs. So optimizing those costs by having more circulation on those lines that exist. But if you know that you have a train station next to your residence and you have a train that is regularly at 1949 to the hour, every day, available all the time, that will really drive the use up, and that will make economic sense. But on the TER, that is the local trains, we are expensing about 25% of what the users. So last year, we had a meeting with the person in charge of the offer for the Lausanne transportation system with a train that is staged every 30 minutes. They have a coverage rate of 60%, and some of their lines were beneficiary lines. That is, they were profitable, making a profit. So we're reflecting on how can we adopt that, because if we do that, we would, it's not about increasing the size of the pipes. It's thinking about how to improve the maintenance of the lines and the equipment, and at the same time offering new routes. How do we set a cadence to that and improve what's existing, and so that the investments that are going to be needed in the next years might not necessarily be glamorous or very big, but will really improve what exists already. So this is a topic that affects a lot of people. So the question of shouldn't we lower the price of the train rather than flights, because sometimes flights are cheaper than the train. But these are markets that are separate. They're segregated markets, and you do not decide on the price of the airline company wants to establish. However, we still have subsidy systems that support the activity of low cost. This is yet another debate, but the pricing is one of the ways we can leverage this. But we're also trying here, what Benoit Lanus is saying is that consumers actually are waiting for better quality that would be provided. So if you match their demands with the quality of the offer, so you have to take into account these components of what quality means, and things that are not necessarily incorporated in the price now. So why do you have so little echo of the Swiss experience in France? Small steps, small adaptations rather than big investments. So decision-making French style is not necessarily... from that point of view, there are things to be said. But in terms of investments that have already been launched, you first have to make profitable call it initial investments, the fixed costs that have been put into the system in order to size a network. It would be stupid not to say that you need to optimize and make profitable the existing network rather than just try to adapt to a demand that is temporary. But we understood that. But why do politicians do not respond to this request? Because people are siloed and we all swim in our own lane. So Occitanie region has the target of increasing by 25-30% the number of travelers. You say that, and that's a good thing. But when you think that the trains, TER, is 30,000 travelers per day, whereas the whole of the inhabitants of the larger Toulouse region is, you can either say, wow, we're good, or, oh my God, we're so far away from the target. So the problem is that we have a spreading of the responsibility, and it's a hot potato that is shifted from hand to hand. So in the beginning, we talked about the need for a TER. The answer from some of the parties was, that's beyond my scope. It's the region. Well, no, it's not us. It's TCO. It's this party. It's that party. And then on top of that, we have a problem with the network itself because, the network requires a lot of repair. You have to know that some lines were made to have a train every half hour both ways. Every 15 minutes, you have places where you have trains that meet each other, cross paths. So SNCF, whatever SNCF entity, is today not able to operate these lines in order to ensure the 30-minute deadline, and the state is under-investing on the quality of the network. And then we're being told that their aim is to have an optimal network that operates perfectly, whereas what we have in the field, in reality, there's lots of patching up of problems on the line. It's not perfect at all. So that hot potato is being pushed into multiple parties' hands. But if you really want to state that we want to move forward, the upcoming months are going to be, the showdown time. Because the state has said we are putting so many millions in this, but we need to have a program, a framework that says this is how much money we're going to put every year for how many years. And the state and local authorities have to negotiate their state-region program. What is needed to ensure the reliability of every 30 minutes? They have to agree now, and they have to stop beating around the bush. Because today, there is a consensus on the need for a Toulouse RER, that is the local train. But if we do not have the agreement today, we will have no step forward by 2030, which means that in the elections, national, local, regional elections will be a showdown moment. So now we have questions from. So what about the independent shuttle on the last kilometer? And how about that flat fee of 49 euros? like in Germany? Is that going to be efficient? And then some general reflections. So the independent shuttle for the last kilometer, that looks a lot like what the logistics specialists in terms of merchandise transportation want to put in place. I think it is important to explore that further, and I think it's going to be a positive thing. To my knowledge, it's not something that is considered right now. So for personal transportation. But this is, again, putting on the table the question of the lack of coordination and the lack of, taking into account of the field reports for when decisions are being made. So political decisions that engage substantial investments, you take that into account at some point, but then the implementation is going to be postponed for investments that take time to be carried out. But between the two moments, if you do not have interaction and, flexibility vis-a-vis what the different parties, including civil society, require, so there is, if there is a discrepancy between the decision-making moment and the implementation moment, this is a problem. On the German example, I shall not answer because about the flat fee in Germany, 49 euros. These two questions put on the table very important topics. So the independent shuttle for the last mile and the 49 euro flat fee. The topic is to make it easy for people to go from point A to point B, simply. What I was explaining is something that applies to urban lines and to rural lines, even if it's for rural lines every 2 hours of reliability. But the, independent or autonomous shuttle, we have bus lines that are parallel to the railways. Bus lines that take people to the train station. In Switzerland, they don't need to have lines every 5 minutes, but we need to have lines that enable people to get to the station and to go from the station when the train arrives there. And pricing is not the only issue because, if you live in the suburbs of Toulouse and you think, I need to take a bus that costs 2 euros and depends on the region, but it's not compatible with the TER that is also managed by the region, and then you get in Toulouse and there is another pricing structure. Well, in other places, they have reflected on a consistent system that works smoothly, and it has to be simple and operational for the users, the end user. So today in our area, it's the case in Toulouse, but also elsewhere, it has to be easy for people, easy for companies. And in that case, you'd have. I just wanted to add that the data modality product, it has to be a consistent thing. It has to be comprehensive or integrated. It has to be an integrated product. You buy a trip, you're going to take the train or a flight. It has to be simple for the individual so that they have a end-to-end integrated traveling experience. Thank you. Just one word of conclusion on the decision to today, all these topics are complex on financially, economically, politically, so that everything remains a debate for the initiated. And as long as it remains within that small circle of the initiated, it's going to be complex. But you have to look at what do people do elsewhere. How do people who today have no voice for this the mayors of small cities or companies that are impacted, how to enable all those relevant parties to participate in the debate and get together around the table and gather their forces where they can say, well, these are the topics for us. We are putting them on the table. You have to consider them. But we should not always be waiting for top down. We can contribute to that, so that I invite to come and join Rallumons l'Étoile, so that you all as citizens feed this. The more we are, the bigger of a clout. Thank you a lot.